Hi, my name's Alyssa, and this is my presentation on competence to consent to search and seizure. So, as a quick introduction for Chapter 7, which is on competencies in the criminal process, this section begins by breaking down several types of competencies seen within the criminal process. So, by giving some examples through provided case studies, the authors of our textbook focus in on two types of competencies. And the one that reflects most for my topic of consent to search and seizure is decisional competence, which is the competence to make a particular decision. And so the chapter kind of breaks down what this means in relation to that search and seizure and making those requests. And the state is given power to make decisions for people who are unable to care and make those decisions for themselves. And it's given this phrase that translates into state as parent. So with this in mind, it's really important that the state does not use this power that it's given to justify intervening in a person's life unless the individual lacks the capacity to make the decision or to perform a specific act at hand. So a majority of this chapter focuses on the Fourth Amendment and how it relates to the issue of search and seizure. So the Fourth Amendment reads, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, and the persons or things to be seized." So the authors of our textbook state that the government obtains much of the evidence used in criminal cases through searches of people's houses and effects and papers, as well as searches of individuals. So as mentioned in the Fourth Amendment, this amendment prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures. And it's really important that this information is obtained honestly and following the proper protocols, because any kind of violation towards this amendment could cause the submitted evidence in court to be thrown out if it's wrongfully obtained. So the book discusses specific pieces of data that explain how circumstances in how a person is asked about a search and seizure often impacts how voluntary or involuntary they will be towards the search. So one of the studies that was provided in the chapter, I believe it's pronounced Kaigahiro, is the person of the study, and in their simulated search scenarios, they found that search requests phrased in different fashions would result in different perspectives or different ways people view a specific request being made. So an example of this would be phrasing asking to do a search and siege, phrasing it as, "Would you mind if I came in and looked around?" That resulted in higher perceived choice than a declarative request, which could be phrased as, "I would appreciate it if I could come in and look around." However, the former type of request resulted in a greater likelihood that entry would be granted and that questions would not be asked about the police objective. This study concluded that more detail the police provided in their request about their objective, the less likely it was that a person would feel free to ask the police to leave, and once the consent was given, they were more inclined to help and provide the information needed. And so kind of an example of this would be in a similar matter of, like, if your parents come into your room and start declaring, like, you need to clean your room, clean it now. Obviously, you're going to feel more inclined to not want to do your room when it's being come in, or when it's them coming in and it's more of an aggressive tone, as opposed to them just simply asking and being like, "Hey, you got to clean your room because so-and-so is coming over." You're more inclined to listen to them and go along with the requests they're asking. So, one situation that was brought up in another study included in the chapter was whether or not people know that they have the choice to decline a search and siege. So, in situations where consent is provided for a search, citizens might feel as though they didn't have a chance to decline and weren't given that option. And some may not even know that they do have that option, that they can say, no, I do not consent to a search and siege of whatever situation or whatever the request is for. And some might think that the refusal of the request may result in worse consequences or may have them being seen as uncooperative and make the situation harder or more difficult for them to get through. And so this was a very interesting fact that I actually relate my discussion question to, just because it is that question of, well, if they don't know about the situation, how does that impact their right to consent? This is the media source that I found online. It's through PBS. They have a series called Crash Course. And in this episode, the host, Craig, talks about police searches and seizures and how they interact with the rights of the Fourth Amendment. And they do a really good job of breaking down the Fourth Amendment and explaining specific rights someone has in a really easy to understand video. And it really has really great visuals, which for me, that's a huge part of me kind of understanding information that I'm taking in. And so I thought it was a really fun video to include. It's about 8 minutes long, but it really breaks down that idea of search and seizures and a person's rights on what they can do within their situations that they're faced with. And lastly, as mentioned in Nadler's study, some individuals might not know that they have that right to decline consent to search and seizure. And so, as I had previously stated, my discussion question is just focusing on that topic of if it's not explicitly stated that they have that right to decline consent, is the consent that they're giving truly being given? So I thought that was an interesting topic to kind of focus on for my question. And then finally, I've just provided the references that I used, just citing our textbook and then the U.S. Constitution for the amendment provided. So thank you for watching.